Hi to my early childhood colleagues in Nebraska. My name is Sharon Easterling, and I'm a partner with Opportunities Exchange. And I'm pleased to present to you today this webinar called Business Leadership and Technology, a Winning Combination. Let me just introduce myself to you. I started my career in early childhood education way back in the 1980s as a preschool teacher and director. And I worked in a very poor neighborhood in Philadelphia. And it was there that I saw the power and the promise of early childhood education. And so I founded a small nonprofit organization to try to increase and improve the resources for children in that community. And then in the early 90s, I became the executive director of the Philadelphia area NAEYC affiliate. And in that role, I had the opportunity to work with hundreds of early childhood programs, trying to improve quality. But it became really clear in that work that you could not just work on one part of the system, that you actually have to address the business side and the very persistent problem of staff wages. And so that has really kind of been the hallmark of my concern in my work over the years, is paying attention to quality and sustainability in the early childhood field. And so it was kind of a natural progression in 2016 when I retired from DeVacy that I went to work with Opportunities Exchange and the team there. And I'll say a little bit more about that work in just a second, but I would be remiss if I didn't point out that my most important role and the work that I really love is being a grandmother to three terrific grandchildren, Maura, Anthony, and Max. And I chose a picture that is Anthony and me cuddling on my front porch. So in this workshop, here are the things that we'll be talking about and that you'll learn. First of all, what do we mean by the term business leadership, and how does it address persistent challenges in the early childhood sector? And then we'll talk about how childcare management software can really change your role from being an administrator to a business leader, and how important that is in these months and years ahead in these uncertain times. And then we'll talk about some key features of childcare management software and what do you need to know when you're selecting a system. So Opportunities Exchange is a group of consultants who work at the national level. We work in many different states all over the country, trying to do a couple of things. We sort of work in two areas. We try to have an impact on public policy and public financing to help to ensure that sustainable high quality programs are incentivized through our public policy. And secondly, we provide technical assistance to community groups and sometimes to state leaders to develop new business models, to take apart the way that we do childcare and early care and education and try to put it back together in a way that it is more sustainable and there are more resources to attend to the critical factors that ensure quality. We like to say at Opportunities Exchange that our core values are these: that every director deserves an administrative team, that every teacher deserves pedagogical leadership, and that every child deserves a reflective teacher. That's really what drives us. So, why does business automation matter? Well, first of all, and I don't have to tell you this, childcare, the business model in childcare is very challenging. We operate in a market-based system, which means that what people pay for the service is what they can afford and not necessarily what it costs to pay for high quality. We also know that the average size of a child care center in the United States is about 60 children. And at that size, it's difficult to get any kind of scale to break even. And we know that a very small percentage of our field actually uses childcare management software, any kind of business automation tools. Probably as low as 20 to 30%. And even among those who have some kind of software available to them, often we find that they're not fully utilizing and maximizing the benefits of the tool. So we have some big challenges in our field. The first one is the program director has way too many responsibilities in her job description. And by the way, I want to point out that when I use the term program director, I mean both center directors and I mean family child care providers or home-based providers. And the reason I use that term is because you really are a director. You're a director of your own program. And so I'll be using that term throughout, and just know that we're going to keep our eye on both the settings for home-based and center-based programs. But the job description calls on you to do a myriad of things every single day. And quite frankly, there's just not enough time. The other challenge is there's not enough money. We all know that. And this picture sort of sums up one of the strategies for dealing with it. We just keep smiling and plugging ahead. So why does business automation matter? Well, we're going to show you in this presentation some ways that it really has an impact on your program. First of all, business automation saves time. When you automate operations, you spend less time actually doing the business pieces of your work. And so you're going to save time that can be reinvested back into education and programming. But the other thing about saving time is when you're having to spend less staff time on something, that means you're also able to reduce the cost of the labor to do that. So you may have 1 or 2 people on your staff whose whole job is to tend to the operations of your program. If you were able to automate those practices, there's a good chance that you could cut significantly back on how much of that, how much of your personnel budget is actually paying for people to do administrative tasks. So you can save money by automating, right? Another benefit is that you can increase revenue. We'll show you some examples of that as we go through the presentation, but when you do electronic automated payments, when you have tools to help you keep enrollment high, those are strategies for increasing revenue in your program. And then finally, we'll talk about skilled financial management, what it means to have information about how your program is operating and then using that information to drive financial decisions and business decisions. Why does business automation matter? Well, directors really want to spend time focusing on education, but more often than not, they're called into managing tasks that you see on the left side of this, seesaw. All of those things and more take up enormous amounts of time. And so even though the director wants to be in the classroom observing teachers and coaching and working with families, more often than not, too much of your time is swallowed up in doing these other business functions. And for a home-based provider, let's face it, having to do all of these practices by hand means that your job literally never ends. Why does business automation matter? Because when you streamline your operations, when you use skilled build leadership in running your program, business leadership in running your program, then you are able to really focus on the education and pedagogical components of your program, which is probably why you got into this field to start with, to work with children and families. So, administration versus business leadership. What do we mean by that? An administrator is someone who spends hours on tasks that, quite frankly, could be done by hand or could be done much faster in minutes or even seconds through using business software. A business leader is someone who focuses on the data, who focuses on understanding what's happening inside of the business and using that information to make decisions that are going to affect the bottom line. Business leadership is a combination of using business automation tools like childcare management software, accounting software, spreadsheets, things like that. Financial management, which is around tracking the data, creating and reviewing reports, and altogether using that to make data-driven decisions. That's what we mean by business leadership. So in business leadership, we want to move away from where we are now to kind of a new space in early childhood education. Move away from everything being done by paper, manually, and really slow processes that are susceptible to errors, to moving to integrated data systems, being able to collect information electronically and then move that data into whatever reporting systems we need to speak to. Move away from passive trainings where you go and sit in a chair and listen to someone tell you how you should be running your business, and move to business training and coaching that has you take those business principles and practice them, put them into practice right in your own program. And then moving away from having kind of a part-time or sort of a casual management of your business to skilled financial management, really digging deep into understanding all of the components of the operations of your program. So, business automation, it's a solution to many of our challenges. So let's talk about those challenges. First one is billing and collections. Why does it matter? Every dollar counts, right? Parent billing can also sometimes put providers in a conflicted role. On the one hand, you're trying to become a trusted partner and ally with families. On the other hand, you're asking them to pay their bills. And sometimes those things just don't feel comfortable alongside of each other. Business automation really can take you kind of out of that role. And once you set up an invoicing system, the invoice is sent, the reminders are sent automatically, and it can really change the dynamic. And then reconciling subsidy payments can also be difficult if everything is done by hand. If you've got electronic records, it's much easier to understand whether the subsidy reimbursement you've received is the subsidy reimbursement that you were owed. So the solution is electronic payment systems, right? You can, through using a childcare management software, you can create an account for every child in your program and set up an invoice to be generated at an appointed time and be sent out without you ever having to think about it. And in most of these systems, you can choose the parameters. So some parents want to get a bill and pay their bill every week, some every 2 weeks, some once a month. You can set all of that up, and you can customize it for every family in your program. The other thing that's terrific about electronic billing, electronic payment, is that when you create that child account, you can put into that system more than one payer, right? So sometimes multiple family members will pay the bill, and it will track who owes what and who's paid. If what you're collecting is a parent co-payment and the subsidy is the other piece, you can enter those pieces in. You can do multiple payers. So here's something that we've learned at Opportunities Exchange, is that every time we have seen a program move from manual paper invoicing to electronic billing, collection rates have improved significantly. And I'll show you some specific examples of that as we go through this. Some providers have said to us when we talk about this, oh, but you know, I don't think that would work for me because that's just a really personal kind of thing. And, you know, my parents really, I don't think my parents would want to do that. And I'm not sure that I would want to have my parents pay their bill electronically. Think about this. Your customers, parents of preschoolers today, are millennials. And look at these numbers. 69% of millennials pay bills either online or with direct debit. And more than half of millennials don't even own a checkbook. 14% of millennials pay their bills by mail. And I'm guessing that most of that is childcare program bills. So here's another challenge: right sizing classrooms, getting your staff-child ratios aligned. Now, one of the things we know about the current environment with COVID is that enrollments across the country, enrollments in childcare centers are down. And so it's going to be really important for program leaders to make sure that you have just the right amount of staff for the number of children that you have. It's incredibly important for the stability of your business. That can be a challenging task. So a lot of childcare management software have built in a staff-child ratio management system. It allows you to understand every child that has checked in and what classroom they're in, the staff that you have assigned to that group of kids, and to really be on top of that information to manage staff-child ratios. Another big challenge is staying full. Now, this is true for home-based providers as well as centers, that because the margins are so thin, not being full has a direct and negative impact on your bottom line, on your revenue. And for family childcare providers, if you've got one opening in your program, that means you're collecting 16% less revenue. This is really going to be a challenge, again, in the foreseeable future, when we know that unemployment rates are pretty high, and parents are nervous about group care, about sending their children to be in group care settings. So enrollment, we expect that enrollment is going to be really unpredictable and perhaps up and down for quite a while. And so staying on top of enrollment is going to be really important. How do you do that? What's the best way to do that? Well, business automation will help you to really understand, to gather and understand the data around your enrollment. It'll, for centers, it'll help you understand and track your vacancy rate, to look at that information by classroom, look at that information across time, help you understand trends. And another thing it will help you to do is to manage waitlist. Now, waitlist might not be a big issue right now, but getting families enrolled quickly will be. And so here's what I mean by that. Business automation, childcare management software, I'm using those terms interchangeably, by the way, one and the same. So most of these programs have the capacity for a parent to go to your program website and to ask for more information, to do a couple of things, right? To get more information about your program online. So one big area is scheduling tours. So if you're in a situation where you really need to get your enrollment up and you want to get families into your program as quickly as possible, let's think about the scenario that's going to make that happen in the best possible way. So a family finds your program online. They want to set up a tour. They want to come and visit. So they call you on the phone, and you go to your answering machine, and then you call them back, and you know, eventually the two of you connect, and then you check your calendar and you pick a time, and then the family comes in and you give them the forms. Like, that's the way that it happens now, right? Well, here's what could happen with a childcare management software system. You set up ahead of time on a calendar application that's embedded in all of this. You set up, here's when I'm available to do tours. I do tours of my program every Tuesday and Thursday morning from 9:30 to 11:30 in 45-minute slots, let's say. You populate your software. A family finds your program online. They say, wow, this looks like a great program. I'd love to do a tour. Oh, look, I can schedule a tour right now. I'm going to schedule one for tomorrow at 10 o'clock. They fill out the form. You get notification that you've got a tour. You're ready for that. The family comes and visits. They say, boy, I really like this program. How would we enroll our child? You say to them, go back to our website. We have forms online. You fill all of that out and we will get you processed and you can start on Monday. The family fills out the form. It comes into your system. You convert it from an application to an enrollment form. You've got your tools. You're ready, set to go. So the whole process is much more efficient. So you have the tools that you need to ensure that you're keeping your program as full as you possibly can. So my little picture keeps getting in the way here, but I have a persistent challenge with my graphic. So another challenge is knowing your cost per child. Why does it matter? Well, the cost per child really varies in your program by the age of the child. And frankly, from classroom to classroom, depending on how full those classrooms are. The kind of sad fact, though, is that most people don't really understand their per child cost at that level of detail, right? Like you can't just take your overall budget and divide it by the number of children in your program and say, oh, it's, the cost of care is $10,000 a child for my program. It doesn't work that way. It's a much more detailed process to really break it down and understand classroom by classroom what's happening and what is the cost of care. It's important because you need that information to make good business decisions, and you really have to understand what the gap is before you can identify ways to fill that gap. So here's what I mean by that. Here's what this looks like. So this is an example of a center who's meeting minimum licensing standards. And as you can see, the actual cost of providing the service, when you figure out what are all the expenses in my program that accrue to this classroom and how many children do I have. So what we know about this program is the cost per child for an infant is about $11,000, but the state is paying $7,600, and then when you add the parent share, you have a gap of over $2,600. For the preschool classroom, however, you're actually taking in just a little bit more than your cost. And so you can begin to see how understanding these differences will help you make decisions about, for example, how many preschoolers you can serve versus how many 0 to 3. So, but let's look at what happens when we go to higher quality. The cost at a higher quality, primarily because we're hiring people with higher education credentials. We have some additional costs associated with higher quality programs. The cost for infant toddler care goes way up to $20,000. And look, this is a state that pays a little bit more for quality. They're probably in a QRS system and they have higher reimbursement rates. So they're being paid a little bit more, but nowhere near the additional cost. So the gap here is over $10,000. And even in the preschool classroom now, we've gone from a small profit to a gap. And here's the point. The point is that you need to understand these numbers at this detailed level in order to make good decisions, in order to make what we sometimes call data-driven decisions about running your business. So what's the solution? To understand your cost per child, you really need a couple of tools in your toolbox. the child care management system, and by the way, I've used the icon for ProCare. This is not an endorsement for one child care management software over the others. That is a placeholder to say a child care management software. So a CCMS combined with an accounting system is how you get to financial management. And here's what I mean by that. The CCMS, the child care management system, because you're setting up accounts for every family, because you're carefully tracking all of the revenue that's coming in to fund that position, right? That's going to tell you what your revenue is. And because you know which child is in which classroom, then you can get really detailed information about revenue by classroom. Your accounting package is going to tell you what all your expenses are. That's where you're going to keep track of your payroll, where you're going to keep track of materials and food and all of those expenses. And those expenses then get categorized and assigned to classrooms. And once you have those two pieces of information, you can then begin to understand at a very detailed level what's happening on the business side in every one of my classrooms. And that's what can really help drive business decisions. Here's another challenge. Again, talking about quality standards. Quality standards mean that I have a lot more questions that I have to answer about my program. It may mean that you have to keep a binder with documents that show all of the components of your program. It may mean that you have to carefully track professional development of all of your staff, because the qualifications or the standards require more hours for staff training. And it could be that you have to monitor and report on child assessment tools, child outcomes. Lots and lots of pieces of moving parts in complying with regulations and standards. So having to do all of that takes time away from your work as a pedagogical leader. And quite often we see that people are doing the same task multiple times, doing duplicative work. So again, we're living in extraordinary times. And during the pandemic, there are going to be even more policies and procedures that you'll need to be paying attention to, tracking, and perhaps reporting on. So what is the solution? The solution is really a wave that is coming. And that is something that we call interoperability between childcare management systems and public data systems. So think about this for just a minute. What if you could collect all of this information at the program level and have the ability to then send that data to all the places it needs to go? So what if your families are checking in and out of your program, and then that attendance record goes automatically to the subsidy management portal in your state for you to be paid without you having to do any more data entry? What if information around the meals that you're serving to kids and how many kids and what meals they got, what if all that was collected electronically, able to be bundled into a report and sent off to your sponsor or however you get paid? Same for licensing. Nebraska Step Up to Quality, child assessment. And here's a big one that we've become really aware of as we've had limited childcare for essential workers, is understanding who has openings. How do we know what childcare programs can serve families' need when families go to look for childcare? How do we know that? Well, what we've done in the past is we've been able to identify potential programs, but then usually phone calls have to be made. Do you have an opening? Do you have an opening for an infant? Do you have an opening for a preschooler? What if that information, which is being collected in your child care management software, could be sent to the R&Rs. So when they're helping families find childcare, they know every single program that has an opening and by what age they have openings. Our work would be absolutely transformed. Lest you think that couldn't happen, let me show you one place where it is. So in Colorado, there's a childcare management system called Alliance Core, and it links to the state subsidy reimbursement system. So families check in with via a kiosk, and all of that information about attendance for those children who are flagged who are in the subsidy system, all that attendance information gets sent every night into the state subsidy system. It runs through a check to make sure that everything, all of the families who checked in are in their system, active families in the subsidy system. And then that information gets bundled. The reimbursement gets processed and sent out so that at the end of the month, there's a direct deposit within days, a direct deposit to the provider to pay for the subsidy families. Providers don't have to collect that or send the information. So now the job of the provider, when they get their check and they get the report that says, here's what this represents, the providers go back and check and make sure that it's correct. Sometimes what they find is that a family may have forgotten to check in, or something went wrong with the check-in and check-out procedure, and then they may find that they were shorted in their check, and they can then fix that problem, go back in, correct the error, and correct it with the state and recoup lost dollars. But so you see the difference is the time is spent on reconciling the payment and making sure that they've been fully paid, and not on collecting pieces of paper and mailing them in, and then all of the tedious work around that. So the focus is on actual business leadership and business management. So this is an example to show you that this can happen, that it is happening, and that there is increasing interest at really all levels of government to make these systems work and work better. So this is a really good time. There's an opportunity now for you to begin to step into this world and to this space and know how and how much it will transform your business. Here's another big challenge: teacher compensation. So the chart you're looking at is a document that Opportunities Exchange prepared for folks in New York. And the challenge there is that they're raising their minimum wage to $15 an hour. And they said to us, we just don't know how we're going to meet that challenge because childcare workers are so poorly paid. And as you can see, almost no one in the state is currently making $15 an hour. And so this is going to be a huge challenge. Teacher compensation's been a problem for as long as I've been involved in early childhood education. So is what I'm saying that business leadership can help address the problem of teacher compensation, you ask? Yes. Here's how. Because what we've come to really understand is that a big part of the problem is how money is being spent right now. And so the solution we would suggest is reallocation of resources. So what do we mean by that? Lower administrative costs. Remember early on I talked about how if we're doing processes with automation tools, we don't have to pay as many people to do those things by hand. And when we're able to do that, we can lower the cost, or we can lower the percentage of our payroll budget that we have to spend on operations and administration. That means we free up dollars to be able to pay teachers. The other thing that automation does is it actually helps to increase revenue by helping programs collect their fees more fully and helping programs stay fully enrolled. When you do those things, you're going to increase your revenue. And when you add those things together, where it gets you is to a place where you can maximize your resources for teaching staff. Now, just to try to illustrate this point about lowering administrative costs, we did this table to show the tasks that people, typically operations people on your payroll, are doing the things over on the left and more. But managing payroll, are you using paper sign-in sheets for your staff? Are you sending out paper invoices for billing? Are you tracking attendance by having parents sign pieces of paper? All of those things take an enormous amount of time to process, to take all of that information. Usually it has to get entered into somebody's database somewhere, and all of those things take an awful lot of time. So we prepared this chart based on what we know about what happens when people move from manual to an automated environment. And what we figured is at least a half of a staff person, probably a full-time staff person, is required in most businesses to do all of those processes. Look at the time savings that can happen with automation. That time savings translates into money in your program. If you can reduce your administrative staff, you can save money and redeploy that money into teaching staff. Now, let me get this little face out of the way and show you a place where it actually happened. So in Richmond, the folks there created a shared service alliance, which means that they essentially had a back office. They had an organization that helped them get all of their data into ProCare, that helped them utilize ProCare for all of those processes that I just talked about. And then they were able to reduce their administrative staff. The other really big thing that happened is that the director, who was really a skilled pedagogical leader, the director was able to actually find 17 hours a week where she wasn't having to do paperwork, and that freed her up to go into the classroom and support her teachers and drive the education and curriculum in the program in a more meaningful way. So in the first year of operation, this small child care center, which served about 60 kids, had a capacity to go up to about 80 kids. They weren't fully enrolled. They saved $52,000. Or actually, it was a combination of saving money and bringing additional revenue in. They had pretty high uncollected debt. So they went from 13% bad debt down to 0. They started collecting all of the tuition. There were many, many strategies that were available to them, including moving up the QRS system, the quality rating system, which was going to bring in additional money, revamping their tuition, lots and lots of strategies that were going to change this picture. But just in the first year, there was $52,000 more to work with. So what did the board of directors do? They started a 401k plan for the staff. They increased their contribution to medical benefits, and they gave raises and bonuses to all the staff. And because the director now had more time, the other thing that happened was they were able to plan to open a toddler room because there was enormous demand. But up until this point, the director just couldn't get out from under all of the program management work to be able to do this. And so now they were getting ready to launch a toddler program and expand their services in the community. So this really works. And it is a tool that I think that we haven't considered enough in our field about how to begin to move the needle on teacher compensation. Now, let's talk about provider compensation for a minute. Oops, let me move my picture. Actually, I'm going to do that for just a second. So let's talk about provider compensation. We don't really have in this country any good ways to understand what average wages are, but the best guesses from organizations that study this is that home-based providers probably earn from the mid-20s to the mid-30s. So somewhere between $25,000 and $35,000 a year is probably average earnings revenue for childcare providers. So this chart kind of shows why that is and what that looks like. So this happens to be a set of numbers that are based on 12 children in the home. So it's a large group home. The average price that folks pay for childcare in this community is about $600 a month. You can see that here. So when this provider set up her business, she set her market rate at or her tuition at about 90% of the market rate, having not having good coaching around understanding that market. So she's coming in a little bit under what she could be charging. So that's the first factor. The second is her vacancy rate's about 25%. That's not uncommon. A child graduates from your program, maybe goes into public school or something, and then it takes a little time to fill it. So overall, there's about a 25% vacancy rate. And then not all of the tuition is collected. So about 90% of what is owed is actually collected. So what that means is that the provider is bringing in about $55,000 in gross receipts. And after all expenses, including paying the assistant, the net revenue is $23,000 and change. So here's what happens when there's strong business leadership, and in particular, paying attention to this iron triangle, which if you haven't heard that term before, the iron triangle is a term that refers to what are the business metrics that matter the most in sustainability for childcare programs. What are the business metrics? Well, they are collecting every dollar, keeping your program completely full, and understanding and collecting a revenue for every child that is at least close to the cost of care. So it's revenue sufficient to cover the cost of care, full collection, and full enrollment. So that's what we mean by the iron triangle. Once we pay attention to those three metrics, so the price, the tuition is actually set at the local market, which is $600. The vacancy rate is able to be driven down to 5%, so the program is staying more full. Look at the difference. Look at the difference that makes already. And then the percentage of tuition that's collected, we're driving back that bad debt down. So 100% of tuition is being collected. And look at the difference that makes in compensation, in net earnings for the provider. We've just about doubled earnings. In fact, I think we've more than doubled. I need to add that up. But look at that. What an impact that can make on compensation. So another challenge for centers is staff management. Why does it matter? So there are a lot of pieces, a lot of moving parts to managing staff, from HR, legal, professional development. And when you think about our COVID environment, there's a great likelihood that there will be a number of staff that will need to be furloughed, that will have less than full employment. There will be new requirements for staff training. The job of managing HR just got even more complex than it already was. So staff HR management tools can really help. When personnel files are kept electronically, it's easier to keep them up to date, and it's easier to use that information when you have to show evidence that your staff are meeting all of the requirements. Tracking staff in and out in an automated way makes it much faster and simpler to transfer that information to a payroll service. And then systems like licensing and QRS want reports to know that your staff have complied with all of the regulations, and having that information, again, not in a paper file folder, but in an electronic record, allows you to create those reports to show that staff are meeting the requirements within specified timeframes. It just transforms the job when you have those tools at your disposal. So related to that, but in family childcare settings, there is a huge task around record keeping. Peek behind there and see that where it says record keeping. So why does it matter so much for family childcare providers? Because as a sole proprietor, as a business owner, you have to pay federal tax on your earnings, but you are allowed to deduct the cost of doing business to reduce the amount of tax that you owe. And so when you as a provider are keeping close watch over these key metrics, tracking all of your expenses, tracking all of your work-related time, calculating your time-space percentage, and keeping track of all food that's served in your program, those metrics will make an enormous difference in how much money you have to pay in your federal income tax. But how do you keep up with these details? Electronic record keeping. So here's 3 examples of what I mean by that. But there are lots of other solutions out there. So Kid Care Accounting actually has the most detailed capacity to help you track those specific pieces that I just referenced. Kid Care, if you use Kid Care Accounting, you will have, it will walk you through how to set up your time space percentage. In other words, how much of the space in my home is being used exclusively for my business, and how much of my home is being used partially for my business. And so every time you are involved in activities or you use, you're doing things in your home, a percentage of that will become a tax deduction, and calculating that and then keeping track of every dollar that you spend, every hour that you spend, every meal that you serve, all of those other expenses, all of that will accrue to a tax deduction. You can save $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 putting that money back into your pocket if you're doing detailed record keeping. There's another program, actually, an emerging technology around voice recognition. There's a company called MyMax that lets you use an Amazon Echo device, and you speak into that when you're doing tasks throughout the day, and it will actually translate what you say into a written report. And so it will generate daily reports for each child in your program about what was happening, what you fed that child, what when you did a diaper change, what activities were happening. So you get a daily report, but then it will also track the time that you've spent on anything, working with children and activities before and after. So it's a good way to, in a hands-free way, start to collect that information. And then finally, I've put Excel spreadsheets on here because at a minimum, you should be keeping track of time and expense at the very least in an Excel spreadsheet, because that will allow you to see the data, to compile it, to do what you need to do with that data, to translate it into tax returns. Another challenge is child assessments. Why it matters: more and more early childhood practitioners are being asked to not only observe and assess children, but to report that data into public-facing data systems. And so as if we can move away from documenting everything on paper and then having to then manually enter that information, we can save time. But the other thing we can do when we start to have our data electronically is that we can use that information more effectively. We can watch trends over time. We can do comparisons. We can really analyze the data in a way that we have not really done before. So this is an example of one online assessment tool. This one is called Cognitive Toy Box. And this one is set up as a series of video games that take about 5 minutes for a child to play. And when they play the games are all normed to state early learning standards. And so when a child plays a game on a tablet, the results of that game go and actually populate a set of early learning standards, and it shows you get the results from that experience, and it shows you how children are doing along the developmental continuum for every one of this early learning standards in your state. And then in areas where children need more practice and more growth, it gives you suggested activities. So here's the point of that. Nobody's crazy about using more screen time in early childhood programs, but here's the point. The point is that you can get information, you can get feedback on how children are doing, and actually use that information to think about planning future activities, to planning your curriculum, to planning individual experiences for children that are going to result in a richer experience at the end of the day. And so the studies that this particular application shows that teachers have 2 to 3 hours more per week by using this system. That's 2 or 3 hours that can go into reflective practice. So I would encourage you to explore this area a little more, online assessment tools, and to see how they might be used to really empower your teachers to not only be more involved with assessment, but to really use the feedback that they're getting from those tools. Another challenge is family communication. Communication has always been important, but again, now more than ever. Families are concerned about sending their children back into the world, right? And into group care settings. And so keeping families up to date, using electronic systems to collect information, to get the forms that you need to have filled out, all of these streamlined ways of doing things are going to be really important in this environment. So parent engagement tools are almost always built into child care management systems, and it allows you to have ongoing communication through email, through text messages, sending pictures, sending video clips to families throughout the day about what's happening in the classroom and what's going on with their child. It also allows you to alert families to things that they need to know very quickly. And you can communicate to an individual family, you can communicate by classroom, or you can do it program-wide. But family engagement tools are really important, important ways for you to be able to run your program. So let's talk a little bit about selecting a child care management system, what you need to know. So very quickly, I'm going to go through these. I'm going to talk in more detail about this list of features, but you want to look for a system that is cloud-based, software as a service. You want to think about and pay attention to the issue of signatures. You want something that offers flexible billing. You want to take a look at cost, but understand that cost comes in several different ways. You want to look at how easy the program is to use. think about parent communication tools. Take a look at online enrollment and waitlist management. And if you're in an environment where you're working with multiple sites, think about an enterprise version. So let's dive in a little bit. So cloud-based versus downloaded software. You know, it used to be in the world of computers that when you wanted a software product, you ordered something and it came on a disk in the mail and you loaded it onto your computer and then all your information was right there. Nothing operates that way. Nothing should operate that way. So you want to look for and make sure that what you're using is a cloud-based solution. And more often than not, it will be. Software as a solution, or actually that should be software as a service. A SaaS is what the terminology is. So why do we want a cloud-based solution? Well, first of all, when you're using a cloud-based software system, you can access it from any computer, from anywhere in the world. All you need is an internet connection. Updates, fixes, new features, they're all added. It all happens kind of seamlessly, so you always have the latest version, and it's also included in the price, so you don't have to pay for updates. And here's a really important one. Has anybody ever had their computer crash? We used to, in my old workplace, my technology person used to call it the blue screen of death. Should your computer system ever just disappear one day, your information, all of your data is secure because it's not being kept on your individual computer or your hard drive. It's being kept in the cloud with multiple backups and in a secure way and place. So you don't have to worry about losing your data. And then in a cloud-based solution, in a SaaS, you will pay a monthly fee as a subscription. So that's how those work. Let's talk about signatures for a minute, because if you are participating in the child care subsidy program, every single state requires that you verify that that child is attending your program and through a parent's signature. So it's important when you choose a software system that you understand what the sign-in process looks like. And what I mean by that is there are some systems where the teacher or the director or some other person can mark children as being present. That's different from a sign-in. You want to choose a system that actually has the parent do the sign-in. And there are a variety of ways it can happen. It can happen through a 4-digit code, or it can happen through a fingerprint, or a lot of places now are using QR codes because you don't have to touch anything. They call it contactless sign-in. There are a myriad of ways it can happen, but here's the point. The sign-in actually tracks back to that parent. So the only person who can verifiably sign the child in is the person that has that code or that fingerprint or that number. And so that's what you want to ask for, because those are considered a digital signature as opposed to just marking attendance. So what should you ask when you're shopping for software? Ask, how does your sign in and out process ensure that only the parent or the authorized individual is able to affect this transaction? The next issue is flexible billing. You want to choose a software that will allow you to create an account for every individual child and will allow you to set up a billing system that gives lots of options. So how frequently does the parent want to receive a bill? Can you change that in your system? Do you have flexibility? Can you allow for multiple payors for this service? So subsidy, co-payment, scholarship, pre-K, whatever, they all are accrued back to this individual child. In some programs, you can actually set up a late fee that's connected to the timestamp. So if the parent comes maybe past your grace period and your policy says for after 15 minutes, you have to pay a late fee of $5 for every 5 minutes. You can actually set that system up. So if a parent is coming late, those late fees are going to get added to their bill. So let's talk about cost. Cost takes many forms. So there's the monthly subscription fee, which we've talked about. There's hardware. So you should ask, do I need any special equipment to run this? Or am I able to do it on a tablet? And if so, what are the requirements for that? And then here's the thing that you need to make sure that you understand, and that is the fees for electronic payments, because they can vary pretty differently. So you need to ask, what does it cost? And when I do electronic payments, when my parents pay their bills electronically, what are you charging if they pay through an ACH or an electronic check, if they pay by credit card? And here's what you might want to ask the software vendor. If I give you a typical monthly billing period, what is my monthly cost? What are my one-time costs for startup? So pay attention to all the parameters around cost. Ease of use. Look for systems that have mobile apps, especially for teachers and families, and make sure they run on both Android and Apple systems. You want to understand how to create reports and how to create dashboards. And you want to make sure that you can have families fill out paperwork. Can you put copies of your documents into the system and allow families to fill that out? Because those will streamline your paperwork. So what to ask the vendor? Show me how a parent pays their bill. Show me how a teacher enters assessment information. Show me how I enroll a child. So actually ask them in a demo for the software vendor to demonstrate these things to you. Parent communication tools, I've talked about that already. These are the features and what to ask when you're shopping. Show me how a teacher sends a message, an artwork or a video to a family. Show me how a parent completes paperwork online. Waitlist management. I walked you through that scenario a little earlier about online enrollment, but ask about, can a family schedule a tour online? How would I communicate with a family on my wait list on a regular? How do you help me manage all of that? And then finally, again, for multiple sites, you want to ask about an enterprise version. Can I, in a central office, see all of the data for all of my sites, pull all of that data in together and really take a look at the whole system? Very quickly, I want to point you to the Opportunities Exchange website. The URL is listed there, and we have a section on technology and software tools and some really good documents that will help guide you through understanding this and making good decisions. And then I also want to refer you to a terrific website called Capterra. And if you go to this URL, or just go to Capterra and do a search for child care management software or child care, you'll find more than 150 options there. And two things, you can filter the results for specific things you're looking for. You can compare up to 4 products at a time, and then don't miss the reviews, because people who use the software are invited to go post their experience, and you'll read things that people love about that product and things that people hate about that product. And it will be a really enlightening experience for you to take a look at the reviews of the software products that you're considering. So finally, I want to leave you with my contact information, and I want to encourage you to be in touch. If you have questions, concerns, you're stuck, you just want to reach out and ask for more information about any of the things that we've talked about, I'm here, and it's my job to help you really move into this space of business leadership. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions. Finally, I just want to close by thanking you for the work that you do. As I said at the very beginning, there is no more important work than early childhood education. You're touching the life of a child that will have lifelong implications. This is hard work and this is really important work. So my best to you in your early childhood work and endeavors, and good luck with business technology. It can make a world of difference, and we're here to help. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.